Good evening. Kaylin, are we good to get going? I get a thumbs up from the back. I've got a microphone that's working. Do you want to close the doors to lock everybody in? And also just closing a little bit of the warmth. Is everybody else chilly? It's cold, isn't it? We weren't expecting this little cold outbreak. This is one thing you'll learn about the Academy. The heating is either all on or all off, I can tell you. Sorry about that. So ladies, gentlemen, donors, friends, old and new, welcome to the Academy of Natural Sciences. Can you all hear me okay? If you can hear me, you'll be able to hear everybody else. Nods from the back, great. For those of you who are not familiar with the history of this venerable institution, the Academy was founded in 1812 for the encouragement and cultivation of the sciences. Since then, it has sponsored expeditions, conducted seminal systematics research, pioneered freshwater science, and established a peerless natural history library and archive. Among the 20 million specimens in our collections are shells gathered by Sir Ernest Shackleton, fishes hooked by Ernest Hemingway, diatoms studied by Ruth Patrick, and plants gathered by Meriwether Lewis. It has been home to America's greatest naturalists. In fact, I should note it still is. Debuted the world's first articulated dinosaur, created one of the country's earliest environmental consulting units, and transformed global understanding of freshwater ecology. But the Academy has also offered public education for more than 200 years. Programs that inspire the people who come through our doors to engage with and be in awe of the natural world and the creatures who inhabit it. Such programs continue to this day, including this wonderful annual lecture. This year's lecture is about shark science and marine conservation and efforts to make all science much more inclusive and accessible. The timing couldn't be more critical. According to the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, over a third of all shark and ray species are now threatened with extinction. Right here along the Atlantic coast, several shark species that were once abundant have declined by more than 70% in recent decades. Yet these remarkable creatures have survived on our planet for over 450 million years, predating dinosaurs and surviving 5 mass extinction events. Their continued survival now depends largely on our conservation efforts and the kind of incredible inclusive science we're going to be highlighting this evening. We are absolutely thrilled and honored to welcome our keynote speaker, Jasmin Graham, a pioneering figure in shark conservation and inclusion in marine sciences. Her work represents exactly the kind of boundary-breaking, inclusive science that is vital for conservation success in the 21st century. Before we kick things off, though, I'd like to thank and welcome Art and Cheryl Silverman, who are joining us virtually this evening with some of their family and friends. They are long-time supporters of the Academy and have established this evening's annual event along with an internship program in our beloved Outside In gallery in memory of their daughter, Cheryl Beth. Cheryl Beth was a lover of animals and music, extraordinarily passionate about our environment. Cheryl Beth was also a very, very charismatic communicator and one who left a lasting imprint, not only on the Academy and Outside In, but the countless families she inspired. Through the Cheryl Beth Silverman Memorial Lecture, we can continue her efforts to be a voice for the natural world she so loved. And so, at this time, I'd like to show, if I may, a video so Art and Carol can share more about this lecture and their daughter.
I'm Cheryl Silverman. And I'm Art Silverman. We want to welcome everybody to the Cheryl Beth Silverman lectureship, the annual lectureship. And we hope everybody has an enjoyable time and learns from this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. We knew we wanted to do something to memorialize Cheryl that would have meant a lot to her and therefore to us. This is our daughter, Cheryl Beth Silverman. She was a wonderful young woman. She loved all creatures of the earth from the time she was a small child. I don't know where it came from, but it was part of her.
She was hit and killed by a drunk driver. She was 24. It was 35 years ago. We still miss her, obviously.
Of course. She, as a little girl, would be playing outside of our house, and she would find creatures on the ground, and she would bring them to me, and they were half dead, and she would say, "Fix it, Mommy," and I would tell her, "I will try."
But she had a pet rat. She had multiple hamsters, gerbils,
Guinea pigs.
a lot of guinea pigs, giant box turtle, a mockingbird, rabbits, probably missing things. For a while she had an owl and took care of them until they either died, but some of them she let loose where they belong. She would call the University of Pennsylvania veterinary school. What do I do to feed this animal, and how do I take care of it? And they would tell her, and she would do it.
The mockingbird did not fly correctly, and it was pushed out of the nest.
We assume.
And Cheryl adopted the mockingbird.
And it flew around the house. No limits. Had free reign. She dearly loved all creatures of the earth.
She did.
She was also an ardent environmentalist. I think partly, not mostly, because of the animals that she was worried about. After she was killed, the next few months we became very eager to have something that we could focus our attention on, I guess. We thought of the academy pretty quickly, and I think we started going there at Outside In within 3-4 months, so it'd be 35 years already. Been pleased ever since. It's one of the main focuses of our charity.
We know she would have loved it.
Yes, and it's been a privilege for us to
Yes.
have this done in her memory. It gives us great pleasure to hear her name attached to something really positive. I think we can sing it. And we want to both thank you for coming to this lecture, and I hope everybody really enjoys it. And that's it.
This is a great honor for us.
Yeah, it's an honor for us as well as for our daughter.
Lovely, and she would have, I know, particularly enjoyed this evening's lecture. Thank you, Art and Carol. Your continued support and enthusiasm for the work we do at the Academy means the world to us. So now I'd like to invite Anwar Abdul-Qawi, the Academy's Manager of Animal Programs, to the stage as tonight's moderator. Anwar is, among many things, a zoologist, a conservation educator, a photographer, a gifted musician, an animal keeper, and he's based here in Philadelphia. We are privileged to have him on our staff, and please join me in welcoming Anwar to the stage. Anwar.
Thank you, Scott. It's truly an honor to be here for this special lecture. It's hard to believe it's been 14 incredible years here at the Academy of Natural Sciences. What started as a high school volunteer gig has blossomed into a lifelong calling. From part-time college work to now leading animal programs as manager, this institution hasn't just shaped my career, it has shaped who I am. As a zoologist, conservationist, wildlife photographer, and now most recently an open water diver, my vision has remained clear. Learn, educate, inspire, and protect. These 4 pillars have guided my journey, and they echo the very mission of the Academy. Few places embody those values more fully than our beloved Outside In exhibit. Over the years, we've transformed animal enclosures into thriving bioactive environments. These setups aren't just visually captivating for our guests, they're deeply enriching for the animals, and for the animals in our care, for the people who can also enjoy them as well. From red-eyed tree frogs to diving beetles, and many more surprises to come, my team and I are excited to continue building a space for wonder, science, and stewardship. One thing that I cherish most about being an educator is standing up for the misunderstood. The spiders, the cockroaches, the things that often make us squirm and that make us think. Because I believe that we can only care for what we truly understand. And don't worry, we won't be getting up close and personal with any Madagascar cockroaches tonight. I'm just as torn about it as you all are, I'm sure. But in all seriousness, it brings me immense joy to introduce someone who knows what it means to be a powerful voice for the voiceless. Someone who has dedicated her life to advocating for the unseen and the unappreciated wonders of our natural world. Jasmin Graham is a marine scientist, educator, changemaker, whose work has elevated not just sharks and rays, but the future of marine conservation itself. Her research spans everything from small tube sawfish to hammerhead phylogeny. She serves on the board of directors in the Equity and Diversity Committee and American Elastomeric Branch Society, championing inclusion at the highest levels in science. In 2021, she was named a WWF Conservation Leader, a testament to the impact of her voice and vision. She's also the president and CEO of Minorities in Shark Science, MISS, a groundbreaking organization empowering women of color in the field of shark research. Jasmin has brought her passion to major platforms like Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson, Dive In with Sylvia Earle, and making science more accessible, more inclusive, and more human. She was a key organizer of Black and Marine Science Week in 2020 and remains a vital member of Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science, BWEEMS. And most recently, she became a published author with her inspiring book, Sharks Don't Sink, Adventures of a Rogue Shark Scientist. So with all that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jasmin Graham.
Hello, everyone. Everyone hear me? Yes. Excellent. So I don't normally give presentations in a hoodie, but it's cold. When I stepped off the plane, I was like, whew, it's like full-on summer in Florida, so I was not prepared. Okay, so I'm super excited to talk to y'all today about sharks. Sharks are great, and I'm going to tell you why. So sharks are amazing, and we're going to be talking about sharks. We're also going to talk about how sharks connect to the ocean, how we connect to the ocean and therefore connect to sharks. So hopefully everyone walks away from this, if you are afraid of sharks, moving from fear to fascination. That's always my goal with these talks. You don't have to be like, I love sharks, I want to go swimming with them right now. But I would like to spark curiosity in you, so that's my goal. So before I get started, who am I? I am a lot of things in addition to being a scientist. I think sometimes we forget that scientists are human beings and like we exist outside of science. We're not little robot people. So I'm a classically trained opera singer. I'm an aerialist. That's like Cirque du Soleil. D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, I'm a dungeon master. I play board games. I have a dog. His name is Iggy. He's very cute. I love books. I love books a lot. I do musical theater. I love wigs. There's lots of fun things about me. I'm also a scientist, but that's not all of who I am. So I want you to know me as a person first, before you get to know me as a scientist. All right, so how did I get here? So originally I was growing up, I fished with my dad a lot. He's from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, so I spent a lot of time near the water and fell in love with the ocean. And then I went to a summer camp the summer after my 10th grade year, and someone explained to me that you could get paid to study fish. And that was the first time anyone had ever said that that was a job that you could do. And I was like, well, obviously I want to go do that. How do I do that? So then I decided I was going to go to college, try to be a fish scientist. That was the goal. So I started in college, and I started learning more about the trajectories that you can take in the field. And then I kind of decided, well, I want to be a marine biology professor at a historically black college or university. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to teach the next generation of scientists. I wanted to support and mentor students of color. I wanted to help change academia and STEM from the inside. I wanted to be a principal investigator of a lab. And I wanted to do research on sharks. I was like, that's what I'm doing. This is the goal. And I started walking down that path. And the path got treacherous, and it got hard. And I decided, I don't like this path anymore. And so I stepped off of it. So if you are a person and you're like, right now thinking, I don't like the path I'm on, I'm here to tell you it's not too late to step off. It is never too late to turn around. I decided to step off the path. I call it strategic quitting. We sometimes view quitting in society as a bad thing. Sometimes it is a really good thing to quit. So I strategically quit, and I walked away from academia, and I said, well, now what? I don't know. We're going to figure it out. So then I went from strategic quitting to graceful falling through life for a little bit, and I landed here, where I am now. I co-founded an organization, MISS, Minorities in Shark Sciences, and I actually ended up still getting to do those things that I originally set out to do. It just looks a little different. So I still get to teach the next generation of scientists. I still support and mentor students of color. I'm still working to change academia and STEM, but this time I'm doing it from outside of academia instead of within. I'm still the principal investigator of a lab. I get to conduct research in shark science, but then I get all these bonus things where I'm helping people all around the world. So MISS serves people in 35 different countries. I get to work with K through 12 students. I spend a lot of time with teenagers and middle schoolers and little peoples that are like running around trying to figure out how life works. And I love it, and it's great. I also get to be my own boss, which is pretty dope, I'm not gonna lie. Because you don't have that much red tape. I'm like, hey self, I'd like to do this thing. And my self says, yeah, Jasmin, I think that's a good idea. And it's great. I also get to work in like this weird space that I created that kind of is an overlap of a lot of different things. So I don't feel as siloed as I think I would have felt in academia. So that's really nice that I get to be able to bridge this gap between scientists, policymakers, and then people in communities and stakeholders that often get talked over or not invited into rooms or spaces for their voice to be heard. So yeah, basically whenever people are like, what do? I go, this Venn diagram, I do that. So science education, marine conservation, social justice, that star is Jasmin. Just in there, hanging out. All right, but y'all came here to learn about sharks, so we're gonna get into sharks. So first, elasmobranchs. Raise your hand if you know what the word elasmobranch means. Okay, we have a couple people. Awesome. So, everyone say it with me, elasmobranch. Elasmobranch, yes. Elasmobranchs are the group of animals that I study. So a little bit about how words work, because fun fact, I also have a minor in linguistics. I'm really into words. So elasmobranch is two separate stem words. Elasmo meaning striped or striated, and branch referring to gill or lung. So this is a group of animals that has striped Gills. So elasmobranchs have multiple gill slits. So think about like a goldfish or like a trout or something like that. You know, they have that one little flap that opens when they're like breathing underwater, you know. That's an operculum, in case you're ever in pub trivia. Fun fact, that was a pub trivia question once at a trivia class. And I was like, I've never been so well equipped for a trivia question. But so they have that single operculum, but our elasmobranchs have multiple gill slits. So they have between 5 and 7. Usually 5. If they have more than 5, it's so special it's in their name, like a 6-gill shark and a 7-gill shark. That's so special that we put it in the name. So 5 to 7 gill slits. That's what makes an elasmobranch. Other defining characteristics of the elasmobranch, their skeleton is made out of cartilage. So everybody point to a place on your body where there's cartilage. Okay, I see a lot of people pointing at their nose. Yes. I see some people pointing at their ears. Yes. So that flexible, bendy stuff, their whole skeleton is made out of that. So that makes them lighter, it makes them very hydrodynamic, it makes them very flexible. Some sharks can bite their own tails. They're very, very bendy. So that's what makes our elasmobranchs. So if you have one takeaway, I want you to walk out of this door and be like, I know what an elasmobranch is now. If I got nothing else from that lecture, I know that. Okay, so let's get into our elasmobranchs. So elasmobranchs, sharks, skates, and rays is generally how we categorize them. Whenever I am thinking about them, I think about them as sharks and flat sharks, or sharks and charismatic flat flaps. So this is the small-toothed sawfish. This is a ray, a type of ray, and they're super cool. So we have some sawfish rostrum here, not from the small-toothed sawfish, different species, but still a sawfish. Super cool. Anyone want to guess why they're called sawfish? Yeah, because they have a hedge trimmer on their face. And you might say, that's weird. Why would you have a hedge trimmer on your face? And that's an excellent question. Evolution is wild and it does weird things. So they actually use this to hunt, so they like whack things with it. So it's sort of like if you played the game Fruit Ninja, they just go and like whack, whack, whack. So they also have these ampullae of Lorenzini, which are these little pores that our sharks and our rays have that help them sense electrical fields. They have extra senses that people don't have. So they can sense electric charges. So they actually can sense the heartbeat or the muscle contraction of other animals. Because fun fact, every time your muscle contracts, you're making a tiny bit of electricity. That's why pacemakers send electrical signals to tell your heart to beat. So they like sense that, which is wild. So they have this long nose that's basically like a giant fish detector. So they just go through, they sense the fish, and they start whacking it. And that is, that's what evolution came up with as a strategy, which is great. It actually evolved twice in this elasmobranchs. It developed once with our sharks, and it developed once with our rays. So evolution decided to push this twice. So apparently very effective strategy. Something really cool about the small-toothed sawfish, they are found here in the United States, and the United States is actually one of 2 lifeboat populations. So we call them lifeboat populations because these animals are critically endangered, which is as bad off as you could be without being extinct. You can only find them regularly in 2 places, the United States and the Bahamas. We have them down in Florida where I live. That's mostly where they're centered, but they do travel. They used to be all the way up the East Coast, at least till North Carolina, and all along the Gulf, down to South America, and now you can only find them regularly in Florida. So this is not a good situation for the sawfish. They were listed on the Endangered Species Act in 2003, but they're just so darn cool. Like, look at this nose, right? This is a baby, this is a newborn sawfish. So they are born live. And I know what you're thinking, especially if you're giving birth. Ouch. But look at this little gelatinous sheet. They got this like jelly coating when they're born so that their teeth don't scrape up mama. Isn't evolution amazing? And then that like comes off, dissolves after a week, and then they got their full teeth out and they're ready to hunt. Pretty cool. So small-toothed sawfish is one of 5 sawfish species in the world. The entire group of sawfish, all of the species are endangered. So the sawfish not doing well. So a lot of my work is focused on protecting them. So while we're talking about the Endangered Species Act, you might be asking, what the heck is that? I'm glad you asked. So it was enacted in 1973 to protect animals that are endangered in the United States. It's really important because it helps to protect not only them, like, you know, being poached or exploited in some way, but also protecting their habitat. So part of what we do whenever a species is listed on the Endangered Species Act is we identify what's called critical habitat, which is what you're supposed to protect. And if this would have been yesterday, I would have told you all to go make a public comment about the Endangered Species Act, but it's too late for that. So just be on the lookout for things about the Endangered Species Act in the future in case you want to say something to some legislators. Okay, so we have, one of my studies that I did was looking at how they use different habitats because we had not declared critical habitat for our large juvenile and adult small-toothed sawfish. We had it for the little ones because we knew where they were born, but we didn't know where they went after they were born, and they left the nursery. So I was looking at where do they spend a lot of time so that we can hopefully identify some areas that we might want to designate as critical habitat. I also was very interested in the bycatch risk because one of the major threats for these animals is they get caught accidentally. So that's what bycatch means. It's when they're not targeting sawfish, but they accidentally catch them. Like, if you have a nose like that, you imagine it's really easy to get tangled up in a net, right? Like, you're not getting out of that. You're very in there. So I was really interested in how do we look at where people are fishing, look at where sawfish are spending a lot of time. Maybe there's a way that we can find some way that people can fish, but in a different area or at a different time than the sawfish are there to prevent some of that. All right. So that's my sawfish spiel. Sawfish, great. I'm going to talk about another wild and wacky critter that I studied. I'm going to take a brief pause here to say that my research interests are basically animals with weird faces. So sawfish, and now I'm going to talk about hammerheads. I love an animal with a weird face. Really, like, gets me excited. So whenever I say I study hammerheads, the first question people ask is, what's up with the hammer? Why do they have hammer-shaped heads? And I had that same question, and I spent years studying it, and I don't know the answer. Because that's how science works sometimes. It's very fun. So, first of all, we've got our hammerhead species. So sometimes people think there's just one species of hammerhead. There is not. There are many. So, when I first started working on hammerheads, we had these, and not these, not any of these three. So when I first started, we were here. And then through the process of doing this, myself and some other scientists figured out, surprise, there are 2 more that look just like the scalloped hammerhead, but are not, and it's confusing. So it's what's called cryptic species. So the Carolina hammerhead lives in the same waters as the scalloped hammerhead off the coast of South Carolina where I grew up. And the only difference morphologically we can tell is one vertebrae, which is wild. But genetically they're distinct. The white-finned hammerheads look exactly like the scalloped hammerhead. They just have white tips on their fins. But I would like to credit the man who originally was like, I think these are different species. And then people were like, what? Dr. Gilbert, you don't know what you're talking about. And then they ignored it for a little bit. And then we got genetic processes and we figured out, nope, he was right, different species. So we found 2 more. And then just in the past year, they found another one that looks exactly like a bonnet head, but it's not a bonnet head. It's something else. And it's so fresh, there's not a decided common name yet, so I just put the scientific name. So yeah, sharks are being discovered. It's pretty wild that there's just sharks swimming out there, and we're like, I don't know, that looks like that. It's probably the same thing, and then it's not. So this is why the evolution of this group of sharks is really, really fascinating to me, in addition to them having weird heads. So obviously, the first thing you're going to do when you're trying to figure out what's up with the head is you go and investigate the morphology, which is like how sharks are shaped. So I CT scanned some sharks. This is a little lemon shark about to go through a CT scanner. This is at the Medical University of South Carolina. I know what you're asking. Yes, this is the same CT scanner that people go through. I wait until the people are done, and then I wheel in a bunch of dead sharks, and I put them on the CT scanner, and then I clean it afterwards, because that's important. And nobody knows, because they just go in the next day and they're like, this seems fine, so it didn't bother anybody. So we send these animals through our CT scanner. We get these for museum collections. And then we have this little thing that looks kind of like a polar bear in a snowstorm. Because CT scanners are designed for people, not for sharks. They're made of cartilage. So it's not as clean as it would be with a person. So then I have to do a process called digital segmentation, which is basically like dissecting on the computer. And we get these really pretty little scans. So that's the skin, and we move the skin, and you have, ta-da, the body parts. And so that's how I study the morphology of animals. So when you study an endangered species, obviously you don't want to go kill that thing to go dissect it. So this is how we do it. We do it with CT scans. So what's up with the hammer? Maybe it's random, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, who knows? So basically I found that I could not distinguish which group of the hammerheads came first, the ones with the little heads or the ones with the big heads. The toss-up. If it was the ones with the big heads, that implies that they actually have been evolving the heads away over time, so maybe it was a random mutation that hasn't been particularly helpful, but it also didn't kill them. And that's what matters in evolution. Did it kill you? Could you reproduce before you die? So that could be a possibility. It could also be that the heads have been getting larger over time, which might indicate that it does have some sort of advantage. It's good to have a big head, but who knows? Who knows? So if anyone is out there and they want to continue doing this, I'm tired, I'm done looking at this question. But I am happy to pass the baton over to somebody else. Okay, so other things that I work on. So I work on red tide, which is a harmful algal bloom. So a harmful algal bloom is basically where there's algae, which is naturally in the environment, that's totally fine and hunky-dory, but then suddenly there's too much of that thing, and too much of a thing can be bad. So that's why we have a harmful algal bloom. This particular algae that I am interested in is Corenia brevis, which causes Florida red tide. And it actually produces a brevetoxin that is a neurotoxin. It also affects humans' respiratory systems. So if you go down to Florida and there's a Florida red tide, they'll tell you don't go outside if you're asthmatic or you have any sort of upper respiratory conditions, don't swim in the water, it can be an irritant to your skin, all of these things. Brevetoxin, not good. It also leads to really big fish kills because it sucks all of the oxygen out of the environment as the algae is dying off, and it's just like, it's really gunky and nasty. So Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission monitors this. They typically used to occur in the fall and summer. Now they're like occurring in the winter because our water is warmer now. It's not good. We also keep getting hit with hurricanes, which flushes a bunch of like runoff into our waterways, and that's not good. It's becoming a real bad problem. So in the past decade, we've had 7 red tide blooms, major red tide blooms, in the past 10 years. They used to occur once every couple decades, and now we get them almost every year like clockwork. So not good. And so I'm interested in how does this affect sharks? Because whenever we see the fish kills, we don't usually see the sharks, because I'm going to do a spoiler for the title of my book. When sharks stop swimming, they sink. So we have this issue where we can't count how many sharks die. If they die, can they swim away? What's going on with them? So I do tracking of their movements. So I use two different types of technology. This is called an acoustic transmitter. Acoustic because it makes sounds. And these little receivers are sunk down all along the coast. And when an animal swims past and their little transmitter is making this certain sound that it's supposed to make, this receiver says, this animal is here. And I can track where they're going. And then I also have these satellite tags, PSATs. They're called pop-off satellite archival tags. So they will track their movement. You don't have to have a receiver station. They will just estimate their position. It's not as accurate as this, but it's a lot better if you're going to have sharks that swim away from your receivers, because this becomes a tree falling in the forest situation. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. If there's no receiver to hear this transmitter, it doesn't matter because you don't know where it is. So for our species that move really far away, we'll do this satellite tag. Then it pops off to the surface, transmits all the data to the satellites, and we can recover that information and just pull it down from the satellite from the comfort of your own home, which is wild. This version requires diving down, getting the receiver, bringing it back up on the boat, connecting it via Bluetooth, downloading your data, and then diving it back down. It's a lot more effort, but that's, different types of methods work for different things. So this is the area that I work in and study. This is Sarasota Bay. So these are where our little receiver stations are. During the study period, we had 3 major red tide events. And so I was really interested in, do the elasmobranchs leave to try to avoid red tide? If so, where do they go? How long does it take them to come back? If they don't, do they survive? Like, can you just sit there and be fine? Or is that just like, you're not gonna make it? And then I'm also interested in, how do elasmobranchs get the brevetoxins in their bodies? Is it through what they eat? Is it through the water that they're swimming in and their respiration? Is it a combination of the two? Can elasmobranchs get rid of brevetoxins from their bodies? And if so, how do they do that? Is it through their basic metabolism? Is there maternal offloading, which is basically where a female basically sacrifices a litter of pups and pumps all of her toxins into that litter and then gives birth to them, and that clears them out of her system? Evolutionarily, that's an advantage because, yeah, you lost that one litter, but if you're a mother, you can go have more litters. So that's a great strategy until it happens every year, and then you're just offloading every single time you have babies. That's a problem. So if they don't get rid of it, does the toxin build up over time? And how much is too much? And then the past one study that's been on sharks and red tide, they got samples from sharks that were dead, that had washed up on a beach. So they did it by doing a dissection. And so I'm also interested is there a way that you could do it from blood, or a little piece of their muscle tissue that you could then release the animal afterwards, and be tracking constantly how the population is doing without waiting for them to die or having to kill them in order to get that information. So I worked with New College of Florida, which is a school in Sarasota. Worked with their freshmen, and they did some really cool stuff with analyzing the brevetoxin in some dead sharks that were just sitting around New College because a former professor left them there. And I was like, great, let's see what's going on with these sharks. So they looked at the concentrations of brevetoxin. They found that it was highest in the liver. It was also pretty high in the gill and stomach. So liver indicates that they are at least putting it in their liver, trying to metabolize it. How well they do that, I don't know. And then that's coming in their gills indicates that at least some of the breath toxin is coming through just them breathing. And then stomach indicates that it's also coming through what they're eating. The good news here is that there wasn't as much in their muscle or their brain. With it being a neurotoxin, the fact that it's not reaching their brain as fast is good, because we have had some spinning diseases happening, especially with our sawfish. It's been a very big concern that we think is from not this algae, but a different algae. And so we're very interested in how this neurologically affects the sharks. And if the concentrations are staying lower than the other part of their body, that might mean that they have a chance if they're exposed to red tide. So that's somewhat good news, somewhat bad news, hence sad shark. Okay. So that's a little bit about my science that I work on. I want to close out by talking about where science and society meets. A lot of people, especially like in the old guard of science, think that science is this like totally objective thing that doesn't interact with society at all. And my opinion is that those people are delusional, because you cannot do science without it interacting with society, because you are a person. Hence why I started by talking about me as a person. I am a person, I have my biases, I have my perspectives, and whenever I do science, that is influenced by that. And so I like to think of science and society in all the work that I do, because if I'm intentional about it, I can try to counteract and mitigate some of those biases or blind spots that I have, versus if I'm not thinking about it, then I'm unintentionally interacting with society, and sometimes that goes poorly. So I'm really big on doing science through a justice lens. So in the conservation world, we've been talking a lot about 30 by 30. Like we want to protect 30% of our land and sea by 2030. It's a big goal with a number that's honestly quite arbitrary. And what we are trying to do is achieve that, but sometimes when people are hyper-focused on a goal, they forget about the people involved in the process. And so what we've done is a lot of our MPAs that we've created have been, at least in the United States, have been located in very remote offshore areas, but the coastal habitats and species that are most important to people to survive are not as protected. And so that's why I'm really interested in working with communities. What do they care about? What do they need to survive? What do they need to feed their families? What do they need to be able to drink their water and it be clean? All of that is what I'm interested in when I do my conservation work. So I focus a lot on nearshore species and nearshore ecosystems, like seagrass beds, beaches, dunes, kelp forests, coral reefs, oyster reefs, estuaries. These are all things that are very culturally important to different groups of people. A lot of people rely on them for their economic security. Like in Florida, where I live, our two major industries rely on the ocean. Our economy is almost entirely a blue economy. If the ocean goes down, Florida goes down. We do not survive. And so that is how you get people to care about things. Especially in a world where an environment has been kind of politicized. Like we can all agree that we don't want our homes to go underwater. Like we all agree on that. So that is the point that we start this conversation at. So I focus on ocean justice, which means ensuring that both the benefits and the burdens of ocean use and protection are shared equitably among all people. Because what happens sometimes is like certain groups of people, like subsistence fishermen for one, or like small charter captains, you know, they are having very heavy regulations, and that is really hard on them because they're trying to feed their families. They don't have a lot of time or power to go to DC and try to lobby for themselves, but like big commercial fishing companies do. And so what happens is the little guys get left behind because no one speaks for them, and no one listens to them because they don't have as much economic power. Same thing with coastal communities. We have issues where like some communities will be in very dangerous areas in terms of like We think of like Hurricane Katrina and what happened in New Orleans. Like those communities had a greater chance of something going wrong because no one bothered to look into their infrastructure because there weren't enough people speaking up for them and saying, hey, this community, we need to be worried about our storm infrastructure and all of that. So that's why I focus on ocean justice. So I do that through a coalition called the America the Beautiful for All Coalition. So the America the Beautiful was an initiative started by the Biden-Harris administration that was focused on that 30 by 30 goal. And this coalition, when we got together, we were worried about this 30 by 30 goal, like trouncing over certain communities that wouldn't have a voice, because it's really easy to regulate the communities that can't speak up for themselves, and then let everyone that's the squeaky wheel get away with doing what they're doing. And so these communities are also the most heavily impacted by these things, so they should have a seat at the table. So we basically added the words "for all" to America the Beautiful, because it should be beautiful for everyone, not just for some people. And so we really focused on centering access to the ocean, quality of habitats and communities, equity and justice in the 30 by 30 strategy. So why does all this matter? Well, whenever you have, when you're doing marine conservation not through a justice lens, you end up with a lack of representation when policy decisions are made, which often leads to the demonization of certain groups. And this is something that we see all the time, especially like in the shark world. Shark fin soup is a whole big thing that everyone is like really like hyper-focused on. That is a threat to sharks. That is not the only threat to sharks. It's also not the biggest threat to sharks. But it's easy to point to a group of people that has a cultural practice that's different than you and blame them. It's a lot harder to be like, oh, the lotion that I use is also shark product. That internal reflection is harder. We don't want to talk about that. It's very easy to talk about what somebody else is doing. And so we often also will have a lack of compliance, because when people feel like they're being demonized if they're not part of the process, they're not inclined to follow the rules. Because how many of us have had someone say, well, you need to do that, and you say, why? And they say, because I told you so. Does that make you want to do that thing? No, it actually makes you want to like dig in harder and do the opposite of that thing. It leads to hostility towards science and conservation efforts, lack of trust, inequitable distribution of resources, and the people most impacted often go unheard. So the way that we combat this and the work that we do is we use the ICON framework, and then we added some additional letters to it. But ICON is Integrated, Coordinated, Open, Networked Science. And then we use the Iconic Oceans framework, where we add the extra I and C, which is inclusive conservation, because we move beyond just science for science's sake into applied conservation. So we use the Iconic Oceans framework in the work that we do, and that's what we teach all of our members. And whenever I go and give lectures about how to do inclusive science with different schools and stuff like that, this is the framework that I am hoping that we all can shift to. And the reason why this is so important to me is my family. So this is my grandma, Evelina. My family's from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Our family has been there since enslavement. That is where we were enslaved, and when we were free, we just stayed there. We're Gullah Geechee, and the ocean is really important to us. And my grandmother spent her whole life fishing, and in science we would call that a long-term data set. 50 years of fishing in the same water, that is a long-term data set. But no one asked her what she thought about fish and fish populations when she was alive, because she was poor, illiterate, and black. And I think that that's a real shame, because she took with her a lot of information. There are some things that I remember from what she would tell me when she was teaching me to fish, but there's so much that was lost. And so I really have spent the last couple of years working on trying to collect all of the local ecological knowledge from my community, through my dad and all of his fishermen friends. And I'm really trying to connect this local knowledge to the scientific knowledge, to the policymakers' knowledge, because we've been operating in silos and nobody's talking to each other. And like the fishermen don't know why laws are the way that they are. The people making the laws have never fished a day in their life. There's a lot of disconnect. So that's what I'm interested in. So I'll just share a little bit of the interviews that I did.
When we used to go to the ocean, the water was way down there when you got there. The water's up in them. You used to have sand dunes. I mean, you can get behind there and nobody can see you. Now when we get a full moon, the water comes all the way just about to the street.
Coastal communities are often the first to experience the effects of changing and negatively impacted coastal ecosystems. Sea level rise, increasing water temperatures, and urban development can lead to habitat destruction, decreased resource availability, and loss of cultural practices. Local ecological knowledge is regularly overlooked in the work of governing bodies and scientific institutions. However, it is increasingly important in providing information for better management related to local areas of expertise. Incorporating local ecological knowledge research also helps to better engage with and understand local communities. The knowledge of local fishers can be a resource for fisheries management. They can have a better understanding of changes in diversity, abundance, and behavior due to their constant presence in and interactions with the environment.
Hi, my name is Jasmin Graham, and I'm a marine biologist. My family has been in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for as long as we can remember. I come from a fishing family that relies heavily on the ocean. My dad raised me on the water fishing, and it's what started my passion for the ocean. As I started my marine science career, I realized that a lot of the conversations around ocean conservation not only didn't include fishermen, especially fishermen of color, but in fact blamed them for a lot of the issues. This was counter to the way that I was raised on the principles of sustainability, making sure that everyone in the community has enough and that future generations are able to access these resources. This is why I started this project, to reclaim the voices of Black fishermen in Myrtle Beach. My father and I went out into the fishing community in Myrtle Beach to talk to our family and friends about what ocean conservation means to them. We learned that the fishing community actually notices changes in fish stock years before the scientific community. All of the information that we can gather and learn from fishermen is valuable, and we should be including their voices in conservation conversations.
Incorporating the experiences and expertise of locals in management, research, and conservation practices can better reframe projects and better inform researchers on how to achieve the best intended outcomes. Hearing from those immersed in the communities can help direct focus to the issues most important to them and offer novel information that may otherwise be overlooked.
I want my children and my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, this is what it's like. Where it's going, I'm going to go here.
So that was just a little bit of a highlight reel about the project that I worked on with my dad. That's Jasmin Graham. Probably figured that out from our last names being the same. But yeah, it was a really fun experience. I got to talk to a lot of community members, and you know, they're very excited about the project and being involved and being heard. So I'm very proud that this got published. Like just a couple months ago. My dad is super stoked about it. He's like, look at me, a man without a degree that barely finished high school. It's scientific publication. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. All right, so I'll wrap up with like how this translates to media and the way that I communicate science. So I've done a couple of things with National Geographic Shark Fest. The most recent one was about shark depredation, which is where sharks bite or take all of a fisherman's catch. And I got to be involved in this really cool project that was on Shark Fest last year called Shark Beach with Anthony Mackie, Gulf Coast. and we kind of dove into this. We got to hang out with a bunch of fishermen. Highly recommend it. Check it out. And then Sharks Don't Sink, Adventures of a Rogue Shark Scientist. It's a book that I published last year, and the title means a lot to me because it kind of talks about how sharks and my connection with sharks and the connection with the ocean shaped who I am, but also how the ocean shaped my community and my family. And it draws a lot of parallels between the way that we view sharks and the way we view communities of color. And the big lesson that I want people to take away from is resilience. And sharks are incredibly resilient. They've been here 450 million years. They were here before dinosaurs. They were here before trees. They were here before Saturn had rings. They've been here a long time. Like, it is really hard to conceptualize 450 million years. That is a long time. And they're still here, and they're still swimming. And then I also incorporated this weird scientific fact that sharks, even though they live in the ocean, are negatively buoyant, which means that they naturally sink. And the thing that keeps them from sinking is movement. So they work kind of like airplanes. Airplanes get up enough speed, and things that shouldn't fly, fly. And I think that's pretty cool. So that's why I named that book Sharks Don't Sink. So I'll wrap up by talking a little bit about myths and why we exist. So we want the equitable representation of gender minorities from historically excluded communities of color and the global south in both shark and marine science to be the norm rather than the exception. I would love to tell someone that I am a scientist and have them not respond with, "You don't look like a scientist." Because I want anyone to be a scientist, like that concept to be open to anyone. So a lot of my work with myths has been trying to understand why we have lack of retention in the field of marine science, because some people would have you believe it's because people of color aren't interested in science or aren't interested in the ocean, and that has not been my experience at all. When we founded MISS in 2020, it took us a year to get to 250 members, and so obviously the interest is there. There are other factors that are at play, and so trying to understand that and address the root causes. So here we are at over 400 members, more than 30 US states and territories. We're now at, I think, 35 countries. We have a really thriving community of people that do marine science, and it's really great. We do a lot of programs with them. We also do a lot of education and outreach in the community, helping people move from fear to fascination when it comes to sharks. We have an online curriculum. If you're like, wow, that was awesome, really jazzed about sharks, go online here. There's all sorts of curriculum and content for you to learn even more about sharks and why they're so cool. We also do in-person programming as well in our local community in Sarasota, like our summer camps, which are pretty awesome, which we're gearing up for whenever I get back. We have professional development for folks that are in college or have recently graduated or trying to do a career switch and they want to get experience in the fields. We have our workshops where we go out on a research vessel for a weekend and teach people field techniques. We also pay for fellowships because marine science does this weird thing where they ask you to work for free, which is absurd. Or they, even worse, ask you to pay them for you to work for them, which is a big problem. So we fund people to go do internships with different organizations that we partner with. We also have our Diversifying Ocean Sciences program, which is a hybrid program to help people who are in transition or in some sort of gap in their career trajectory to make it to that next step. We pay for people to go to conferences and present their research, because conferences are also expensive, really hard for people to get to. And then we do our own research. So we have various projects. We support projects within our membership through our Iconic Oceans program, where we support people to use the Iconic Oceans framework and the research that they're doing. We have hubs in Sri Lanka, India, Brazil, forgetting someone. Nigeria, and Qatar. So we support research there. We've published a book that talks about some of the research that we're doing with all of our members, so definitely check that out. This is more like a textbook. The other one's more like a sit at the beach and read book, so take, just so you know, you're not surprised. And now we've reached the shameless plug portion of my presentation. We're coming up on our 5th Missiversary, 5 years. Yay! We have really cool virtual events. Notice sharks and side quests, because we got to get some D&D sharks in there. We've also got speed networking, sharks and crafts, trivia, because I love trivia. We've got a master class, all sorts of things. You can come to one event for $10 or unlimited virtual events for $25. And that supports a good cause. If you're feeling like, oh, I really want to go to Sarasota, Florida, we have in-person events as well. We'll be premiering our documentary. We'll be going on a little excursion. We'll be having a fashion show, Ocean Couture fashion show with some sustainable brands. And it's going to be awesome. So you can do all of that for $25 without the fashion show, or $50 including the fashion show. And if you're really gung-ho and you want the VIP experience of coming and doing shark tagging with us and hanging out for the whole weekend, getting the VIP treatment, there is the VIP experience. And if that sounds awesome and you're like, how do I participate? You scan this QR code. You also can donate on that QR code. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It is hard out here these days for 501c3s. Support your 501c3s. Okay. Yay. Thank you, everyone.
$20. What is an elaborate? You got that? What is it?
A fish with more than one gill.
Gill slits, yeah, I'll give it to you.
Okay. I'll send you a check in the mail. Excellent job. All right. So Jasmin and I, testing. So we talked a lot backstage, and we bonded over so many things like gaming and movies and pop culture. And one of the things that I can't stand the most as an educator is that people come to work and they say, "I'm afraid of spiders because I've seen this movie. I'm afraid of snakes because I've seen this film. I've seen this TV show." So pop culture things. We talked about Jaws. We talked about Ghost Shark, Sharknado. What is the one myth you can't stand when it comes to sharks?
I think it's the drop of blood from a mile away thing. I don't know where that came from. That's wild. And then it's just like, oh, you drop some blood in the water and suddenly every shark in the ocean comes to you. That's not how that works. But it has people terrified. And also, if it's human blood, they're not interested. They don't eat you. Maybe if you put some like tuna blood in the water, you might get, a shark that happens to be swimming by, but they need to be near it. It doesn't just work like that. I like to explain to people, like, when somebody passes gas in a room, there are, people that are immediately by them that immediately smell it, and then, you over there in the corner, you're never going to smell it because it diffuses. It's going to diffuse. It's a whole ocean. That's not how that works. Maybe the shark beside you can smell it, but not the shark that's way over there. But they make it seem like every shark in the ocean comes when you have blood, which is wild.
I'm going to definitely use that. That's all kids. I love that. It's amazing. So you have so many hats. You're a scientist. You're an advocate. You're a gamer. You're a dog mom. How do you balance life?
Google Calendar and saying no. It's my favorite word. Woo! No. Actually, I say it nicer than that. I say, unfortunately, I'm at capacity right now.
So, I have one more question that I'll open up to the audience. What advice would you give to someone young in this field, especially a woman of color?
I would say that follow your passion and follow it wherever it leads you. And sometimes it'll lead you one way and then your passion will change. And that is normal. Like, there's no way we go our whole lives without something about us changing. And so I think that sometimes whenever we talk to kids, we like set up this like life path. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? So whenever I think of that question, what do I want to be when I grow up? The answer is happy. And whatever that looks like in the moment is what I'm going to do. And I think sometimes people, especially young people, put a lot of pressure on themselves to have it all figured out. I don't have it figured out. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, let alone like a year from now. And so, like, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to strategically quit. Don't be afraid to switch gears. You might be really into this thing and then you're into that thing, and that's totally okay. And everything doesn't need to line up on this perfect little path. Everything doesn't need to quote unquote have a purpose. Because you might not see the purpose right now. Like, if you want to go, I don't know, go start playing Quidditch, go start playing Quidditch or whatever you want to do, you know, do whatever. I just picked that because I had a friend in college that played Quidditch. Which is a random thing, but it brought him a lot of joy. And he's a computer scientist. And that has nothing to do with computer science. And he had a brother who was like, you need to stay focused. You're playing a silly made-up sport. And I'm like, but it makes him happy. Let him do it. And he was so happy all throughout college because he did that. So, you know, do whatever you want.
You mentioned a good point. Like, it's that question of like, what do you want to be when you grow up is such a hard question. I was asked that as a kid. And it's a really hard question to ask someone at a young age because like, no one has the world figured out. And I love to ask if they're just being happy, not being too doom and gloom, because the world right now is in a really interesting situation. So just being positive, just having people follow dreams and inspiration. Do we have anyone from the audience?
Do underwater volcanoes affect sharks?
That's a really good question. Actually, sharks love underwater volcanoes. There's a couple of researchers that study the sharks that hang out around underwater volcanoes. They actually use that as a habitat. The warm water makes it so that it can live somewhere where the water temperature changes outside of their range, but then they can go to the underwater volcanoes and seek refuge there. So yes, sharks do like underwater volcanoes.
You mentioned you like animals with like funny faces. Do you like the tasseled wabagong?
Yes, I love wabbagongs. They're so cool.
Sorry for being far. That's okay.
If you were today in a different field and you had to switch into the field you're in right now, where would you start?
Where would I start? I'd probably go to an aquarium or someplace like that, and be like, hey, you need any help with anything? Like, or I'd like, I don't know, follow scientists on social media, and I'd probably like slide into their DMs. That's probably what I would do. Send a cold email. Scientists love talking about themselves. So, like, if they have time, and you're like, hey, I'm really interested in your research, can you tell me about it? Like, if they have time, they're gonna be like, yes, I've been waiting my entire life for someone to ask me about this very specific snail that lives in this one place. Yes, I'd love to tell you all about it. Yes, I would just talk to somebody that you found their research interesting.
Be careful what you ask for with that.
Thanks, that was a really great talk. And I wondered, you talked about that you left and basically found academic marine science to be really problematic, and now you're fixing it from the outside effectively. So what in particular would you say are the priorities for fixing marine science? Well, maybe academia generally, but certainly marine science, and maybe from the point of view of what your experience.
Yeah, so a lot of it is power dynamics. We have some really problematic power dynamics in academia. Like I like to explain academia to people that have never experienced academia and just watch their face. It's like, yeah, so you have this one person who decides effectively, I mean, you have a committee of people, but that one person is like a huge, huge weight on whether or not you get the degree, like your master's degree or your PhD, and that one person can basically stop you from getting the degree. And it's kind of absurd that that one person has that much power. And that's where we get a lot of toxic problems where people are like abusing their students, exploiting their students, harassing their students, and the students don't have a means to, like, HR in academia is like not really existent. So that's a big problem, the power dynamics. Also the publish or perish mentality, that like your value as a scientist is your publications, and like not seeing any other things that people do, like, you know, when they come up for tenure or where, you know, whatever they're doing, it's like, oh, the thing that matters is have you published in this journal versus that journal, and how many publications do you have, and we don't really have an expansive view on what value of science looks like. And then the third thing I would say is just like institutional structures that are in place, that have been in place for a long time, many of which were specifically designed to keep certain people from entering academia, and we just like keep doing them because we're like, well, that's how we've always done it. Things like, oh, we'll reimburse you maybe in 5 months, but you need to pay for this conference out of your pocket right now, and we'll reimburse you afterwards. Maybe. Like I had an issue when I was in college. It's the only time I've been flat broke, and by flat broke I mean begging someone not to tow my car because I had no money to get it out broke. And that was because I had all these expenses and my stipend was a month late. And I didn't have enough money to eat. I didn't have enough money to do anything. And that's a problem, and especially because they're like, oh, you need to get research experience, you need to go do these internships, do these REUs, and I did that, and I had to stop doing my part-time job to do that, and then they didn't pay me on time, and they had no recognition of what that could do to somebody that was living on the edge. And so it's really hard for people who have to work to go to school to go get experience, because they're asking you to choose between eating and science, and that's not a fair choice to ask somebody to make.
All right. First, thank you for the information you have shared. I love your enthusiasm. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, you mentioned you're discussing the growing, or there's more coming down. I'm assuming there's a component to that about global warming or temperature in the ocean rising. How does that play with the fact that we have more hurricanes more often now? It used to be once a decade you would see something in Turkey, but now we're seeing it basically annually. There's any relationship with shark behavior in hurricanes? What happens after a hurricane passes? And now my second question is, you mentioned how people, oh, you're a scientist, you don't look like a scientist. But I want to ask you also, when you went to interview the fishermen, minority fishermen, most of them I assume, when you tell them, I'm a scientist, what is their reaction? I'm proud that I've seen somebody like me. Oh, you cannot be a scientist, or how does that work?
Yeah, so to the hurricane thing, yes, as someone who lives in Sarasota, Florida, that got slammed by 3 hurricanes in a row, Yeah, it is a problem. The extreme weather events are becoming a big issue. Sharks do swim away from hurricanes. So when the barometric pressure drops below a certain amount, sharks will leave the area, at least the ones that are big enough to go out into the open ocean. And the smaller sharks will hunker down in like estuaries and stuff like that. Whenever we had our 3 hurricanes in a row, we fished every month from October to, well, we fish every month for our surveys. From October until March, we did not catch a single shark. It took that long for the sharks to come back. We also had red tide from all the gunk in the water, and there are a lot of other factors, but it takes a long time for sharks to recover. And sharks are an indicator species. If the ecosystem can't support apex predators, it is not healthy. If you can't support, your big sharks, or even like if you can't even support mesopredators, the like small sharks, like you can't even support bonnetheads or something like that, that's a problem. So yes, that is definitely having an impact. In terms of talking to the fishermen, so whenever we drive around in our van that says Minorities in Shark Sciences, most of the time I have people walk up to me and say, that's really cool. Like, I'm really proud of you. I had people offer to buy me lunch. They're like, oh, it's so good to see you out here doing that. You better get it, girl. It's very, people are very stoked. So yeah, talk to the fishermen. I mean, one, they're from my community. My family has been in for a long time, so there's also that connection. But yeah, I talk to fishermen a lot, like even outside of my community, even fishermen that aren't people of color, and they're stoked that scientists are even just like talking to them like they're people and not talking down at them and wanting to have a conversation. And so I like hang out on Fisherman's Boat. I'm about to go hang out on Fisherman's Boat tomorrow. I was on one yesterday. Shout out to Captain Jeremy. Doing big things down there. So, I mean, they're like super stoked. They're like, what do you need? How can I help? Especially because they recognize that the health of the ocean is directly tied to their business. And so they're like, you sit down and talk with them and it's like the floodgates open. And they're like, let me tell you what I think about this. Let me tell you what I think about this. And you know what, we need to be doing something about this. Because no one has ever asked them. And like, you're asking them and wanting to have a conversation and they just go. I get so much information. And it's an untapped resource. And like that dialogue, like I have things that I can tell them that help them be better fishers and more sustainable fishers, and they have things that they can tell me. It's a beautiful reciprocal relationship that you never have if you don't start a conversation with somebody.
What's your favorite kind of shark, and like why do you like it more than other kinds?
Yes, my favorite shark is the bonnethead shark. One, it has a weird face. Two, it's part of the hammerhead family, which is my favorite family of sharks. Three, they're adorable. Go look up a picture. And sometimes people will be like, sharks aren't adorable, and I'm like, and you're wrong, because you haven't looked at a bonnethead shark. And then I show them a picture, and they're like, okay, that's cute. They're very cute. Also, they're the first shark that was discovered to be omnivorous, meaning they eat both plants and animals. So they eat seagrass, and it actually makes up 40 to 60% of their diet. So they actually eat a lot of seagrass, which is really cool.
Is there a reason why some sharks have intrauterine cannibalism?
Yeah, evolution, man. Evolution is wild. So first of all, for the people that aren't as up to speed as this person that asked this question, what they are describing is this phenomenon where there are shark pups in the uterus, and like, okay, so obviously you need nutrients to grow inside the uterus. And like some sharks, they got like a little yolk sac and they like suck in the yolk and that's how they get their nutrition. Some of them, there's like interuterine milk. So not like mammals, different than that, but like more like a little like seepage of material in the uterus. And they just are like, that's so good, I'm growing, I'm strong. But then others This is where evolution sometimes gets metal for no reason. They're like, there are two of us and only one of us is coming out. And then they just, whoever grows the biggest and the strongest and the fastest eats the other one. And that is how they get their nutrition to continue growing to be healthy and strong when they are born, which is wild. Sharks have some really cool reproductive strategies. Some of them lay eggs. It gets really weird. Shark reproduction is really cool. Don't even get me started about multiple paternity, where you can have a litter of pups and they all have different fathers. It's pretty crazy. They're storing sperm, parthenogenesis, just asexually reproducing. They're wild. Wild. Sharks are wild.
So I guess my question is technically for the both of you. As someone who is an HBCU student on my last year, what is some guidance that you would be able to give? Because there are many branches of sciences that aren't necessarily talked about. From my experience, if you're going to an HBCU, it's medical. You gotta go into medical sciences somehow, or something in chemistry. And it's like 20 of the people like me who are interested in the animal sciences and wildlife biology or marine sciences that don't necessarily have anybody to really look up to. So what is some guidance that you were able to give?
Yeah, so kind of going back to a previous question, I would, museums, aquariums, they're really good places to get your foot in the door with animals. If you have the opportunity to do like an internship or something that's paid, don't work for free. We're done with that. To go and intern with someone that does animal research. But yeah, zoos and aquariums are really good places to get started on things like that. Or I don't know, the academy right here. Maybe talk to them.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that as well. It's for me in general, it's like you never stop learning. Even to this stage, I'm developing new skills. So I've always had a passion for wildlife and nature. I went to high school and I knew I wanted to work with animals. So I volunteered at the academy since I was a little kid. I was probably the same height probably, but I was a little kid at the academy, went to Philadelphia Zoo, made connections, and as I grew as a learner, I was like, I want to be a teacher. And I learned what teachers go through. I was like, I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I want to be a college professor. I was like, I can't do that. And then I was during COVID, I discovered photography, and then that has changed my life forever. So the thing is, as she mentioned before, is go to places like the zoos, go to aquariums, come to the academy. We have a great thing called the Women's Program, Women in Natural Science, where we highlight women, we try to give them experiences and push their careers forward. And the same exact thing, it's you never really stop learning. I'm 30 and I'm still finding things about myself, about science and conservation, and you just really keep growing and growing, and you evolve as you learn things. So yeah, it's a great question.
So as her mom, I'm going to follow up and say that we've done all those things. We've been at the Academy of Natural Sciences. I've kept a membership specifically preparing for her to take this journey, and we have not gotten sponsors. So I'm so glad that you're mentioning it, because I'm going to find you after this talk.
So luckily for you, I'm the manager, I hire, so yes.
Both of you, thank you so much for your enthusiasm. Thank you specifically, Jasmin, for following the Sankofa method of going back and getting information and us not trying to reinvent the wheel. And I appreciate the reciprocal relationship that you are having, because a lot of times we are used and exploited for our information and our knowledge, but not given anything back. So thank you, and I wish you both the best of luck in your continuing movement.
Thank you so much.
So I know you talked a bit about the research that you were doing with the red tide and algal blooms. How do you think that's affecting sharks with the algal blooms that are occurring on the West Coast? Yeah, I would assume that it's similar. I do not work on the West Coast very much, but I think that a lot of these issues can be extrapolated to other types of algal blooms. And that's one reason why I think it's really important, because across the board, we've never studied how algal blooms affect sharks. So I would be really interested to see if we have similar responses to the like toxins and things like that, or if they are able to avoid it. I know here in Florida, it's very patchy. So like it's not the whole area, so they usually will just strategically move around because it's never like the whole coast. So I don't know if the algae blooms on the west coast are the same or if they're more blanketed, but I'd be really interested to see how the sharks deal with it over there and the strategies that they have. It's a little bit different of an ecosystem, but I think the effects are probably similar. Just the strategies that they use to deal with it might be different depending on how the algae blooms work out there.
We're just gonna have 2 more questions, one right here.
I actually have 2 questions. Number 1, which species of saw shark is that software next to you?
This is a green sawfish, yes.
Okay. My second question is, do chimeras have a spot or a place in the elasmobranch world?
That is a good question. I didn't even get into this. I'm going to make this brief. So, you have your elasmobranchs with your, what is it? Striped gills, yes. They're multiple gill slits. The chimeras are over here because they have a single gill slit. They still have an operculum, but they are made of cartilage. So they are a little weird. So they are part of the chondrichthyans, which are fish made of cartilage, but they are not part of elasmobranchs who have striped gills.
Okay, we have one last question.
I want to know if you know anything about Greenland sharks and how they catch like really fast moving fish, even though they're really slow sharks.
I don't know much about Greenland sharks. I know they live to be really old and then they have a parasite that eats their eye and replaces it. Those are 2 things that I know about Greenland sharks. Right? Nature's metal. I'll say it again. Metal for no reason. But yeah, they just live the rest of their lives blind and it's fine, and most of them are blind because of this parasite. I don't know anything about how they hunt though. So, I don't know. Go look it up, because I don't know.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Remember that conservation doesn't just happen in the wild. It starts with curiosity, with compassion, and with each of us. Like the shark, may we swim with purpose, guided by curiosity, never sinking, always seeking the deeper wonders of our world. Thank you, and thank you again, Jasmin, for leading the line.
I'm just going to put this QR code up here one more time.